everyone, welcome back. My name is Sofia. Olá a todos, bem-vindos a este canal. O meu nome é Sofia. In this video, I will share with you about the use of era, verbo ser, e estar, estava, verbo estar. So in my previous video, I spoke about different forms of past. One of you asked, what about era? Can you be more specific about era? I love this question because it is a very tricky topic. And so the challenge was great, and my video of today answers that same challenge. When do you use era? When do you use estava? Let's start from beginning. We learn present tense. When we learn present tense, one of the most common ways of explaining the difference between ser and estar, both to be in English, is to say that ser is permanent and estar is temporary. I find this very, very useful in present tense. A lot of people confuse specifically the use of era with the use of estava. I will start with the use of era. The first use of era I will describe as permanent and long-lasting characteristics. This is very similar to what we use in present tense. So when I say this city is very beautiful, in present tense I will use the permanent form and I will say esta cidade é muito bonita. Same happens when I'm talking in past tense. A cidade era bonita. So these forms of characteristics that are more permanent, that are long-lasting, we are using still the form of ser, even though in past tense. Então, por exemplo, era uma pessoa muito alegre. He was a very cheerful person. Ou a cidade era bonita. The city was beautiful. The next part of era is related with identity or inherent qualities. For example, jobs and professions. Ele era professor. He was a teacher. So we use ser here because the role of a teacher is not something that you do temporarily. It's more connected to something that you will do for some time, so it becomes almost part of your identity, of your inner qualities. So when we refer to professions, either in present as something that you still are, or in past as in something you were, we will use the verb ser. We will use in past tense era. Ele era professor. And now the question comes from some of you. But what if I was just a teacher for one day? Why would I not use estava? The reality is, yes, you can use estava, but then you would use eu estava como professor. I was as a teacher. And there, sure, you can use estava, but you will use como as because in this case it's not something that you became, that is part of your identity. My next example, still within the topic of inherent qualities and identity, is the following sentence. Isso era impossível. In this sentence, I am demonstrating the idea that this was completely impossible. This sentence, as well as the previous one, has the possibility of using estava. Isso estava impossível. So I have ser, isso era impossível, and I have estava. Isso estava impossível. What is the difference? Isso era impossível. It demonstrates that this was the definitive nature of the situation. It was just impossible. As if I say isso estava impossível, the feeling I will get is that it was for a short moment impossible. And so the focus is less about being impossible, but the fact that it was for a moment impossible. In the second sentence, the idea is that it was overcome. The next topic is nationality. Nationality, we learn in present tense the same. When we talk about nationalities, we use verbo ser. It's also related with the previous topic. I'm talking about identities. And so nationalities are long-lasting, either in present or in past. So we use ser. What happens when I use era? If I say, eu era portuguesa, the person who listens receives the message as, I was Portuguese. I am no longer. Next topic I want to talk about is time and dates. This is very interesting topic. A lot of my students, they are like, wow, you are telling me that ser is permanent and estava is temporary. Time is an exception. We use time with ser. Por exemplo, era inverno quando isso aconteceu. It was winter when this happened. Eram 8 horas quando ele chegou. It was 8 o'clock when he arrived. Era novembro quando celebramos o seu aniversário. It was November when we celebrated his anniversary or her anniversary. Let's talk about estava, the form of verbo estar. First example I give about estava is related to temporary changing states and conditions. So anything that it has this volatile aspect of not long-lasting but rather short-lasting, we will use estava. So now I'm going to talk about estava, conjugation of the verb estar. The first part of this segment is dedicated to temporary or changing states and conditions. This is, for example, when I say, I was happy, I was tired, the day was warm, it was raining. All of these situations which have a volatile aspect on it, we use verbo estar, estava. Por exemplo, eu estava cansada. I was tired. The next section is location. Location as a temporary thing is more about where I was positioned in the space or where something was for a short amount of time. Por exemplo, eu estava no escritório. I was at the office. Eu estava em casa. I was at home. When would we use era? We would use era, for example, to place something that will be there for a long time. Like, this restaurant was in this street. Then we use era, because it was for a longer period of time. But if I'm positioning myself as an individual in different spaces, I will always use estava. I was at the office, I was home, I was there, I was in this country. Eu estava, eu estava, eu estava. Feelings and emotions, as I mentioned before, they are most likely to be used with the conjugation of estava. Eu estava feliz. Eu estava triste. I was happy. I was sad. The last topic about estava is ongoing actions or states in the past. This will be a more complex construction that is pretty much like past continuous. Eu estava a estudar em casa. I was studying at home. We learn present continuous. Eu estou a estudar em casa. Same thing we can use for past continuous. Eu estava a estudar em casa. This demonstrates an action that was done for a certain amount of time, as an ongoing action, as a habit, as something that had a part of a regular habit on it. And this is what we want to demonstrate in the sentence. Remember that for this form, either in present, either in past, you will not use ser. This form is particularly done with a combination of estar a plus infinitive. Attention, because in European Portuguese, this construction is done differently than in Brazilian. So in European Portuguese, we are using estar a plus infinitive. Many times in Brazilian, I see, for example, estava plus gerúndio. Key differences between era and between estava. Era, as the verb ser, emphasizes essence, identity, inherent qualities, which are generally seen as more permanent. Estava emphasizes states or conditions that are temporary or subject to change. Exceptions, times and dates, or jobs, we generally use verbo ser, which are permanent. This is very particular topic, as nowadays many people say jobs are so temporary, but still the language is adjusting to this. And so if you say I'm a teacher, you say eu sou professora. If you really want to highlight the fact that you were in a specific amount of time, then you will say estava como. So you need to reference that as something outside of yourself. I was as teacher, and there you can use estar. Time as an exception, there is not much I can explain. Rather than we would say era, we would use ser to refer seasons, to refer months, to refer time as hours, time as dates. We use ser, either in present, either in past. Now I'm going to give you some examples in which both could be used, and yet the meaning will be different, and I will explain you why. The first example is jobs or professions. As I mentioned in the recap before, Ele era professor. This means that this was his job. It became almost his identity, part of his inherent quality of being professor. It suggests that it's more permanent, is a defining role. So if I use ele estava como professor, then I suggest that he was working as a teacher for perhaps filling for someone else, taking the role for a short period of time. Nevertheless, I will mention that it becomes something outside of himself, and I will say he was as teacher. The next example is describing a condition or a state. Example, o quarto era frio. So this suggests that the room was cold due to different factors that are permanent. Let's say, o quarto era frio. Perhaps that was the way it was built, made it that it was cold. Perhaps it's the location. It's something inherent to the quality of this space that makes it that it's cold. O quarto era frio. What happens when I use estava? If I use estava and I say o quarto estava frio, this is something temporary. It's temporary and it's at a specific moment. So perhaps someone left the window open. Someone turned the AC too low. There is a bunch of qualities that might have make it that the room was cold for a short amount of time. So o quarto estava frio. Saying o quarto era frio means this is how the room is generally. O quarto estava frio means something happened that made the room to be cold for a short amount of time. Describing a person's feelings or states. Ele era feliz. This implies that he was generally happy. This was part of his personality. This is part of who he was as a person in most times. If I use ele estava feliz, it's more about he was happy in a specific time due to a specific event. It suggests temporary states. However, like generally, we will use estava. Why? Because most likely we are sharing about our feelings, our states, and those are temporary. They can change. And so if I'm happy, if I'm sad, if I am tired, these are things that are more volatile. So by default, I would use estava. Only if I really want to say, wow, this was this person, this was his way or her way of being in life, then I will use era. Describing a situation or a possibility. Isso era impossível. That was impossible. This suggests that impossibility was considered a definitive characteristic of the situation. The situation itself was impossible to solve. The emphasis is in the quality of this situation. Isso estava impossível. It's more about something that was impossible to temporary conditions. For example, it was impossible to go through. But saying already isso estava, which is a temporary, more like volatile aspect, gives me the feeling that this was part of the process. It doesn't define the situation. So using era is more about what is the real quality of this situation, and using estava will be more associated like how was going through this situation. I think that's it for today. I hope I covered all your questions about it, and I hope this gave you some clarity, some more understanding of how to use ser or estar. I would say take this video, maybe make a recap by yourself, write important keynotes, and practice. Write sentences, ask advices. If you have Portuguese friends, if you have a Portuguese tutor, ask, what is this? Write a sentence, is this correct? And practice makes it better. As we say in Portuguese, a prática leva à perfeição. I hope this helps. I will see you soon. Again, if you have any question, any feedback, suggestions, don't forget, leave it in the comment box. As I mentioned in the beginning of this video came itself from one of your suggestions, and I'm so grateful. I really appreciate that you participate onto this learning process, and I hope and wish to see you again. See you soon. Adeus. Até já.